next item of business on our agenda is item 5, public hearings. Item 5 is a public hearing on the request to establish a Type 41 alcohol beverage control license for Edwards Theater. And tonight, you are being asked, this is for my colleagues up here, you're being asked to consider the use permit for Regal Entertainment Group, administrative use permit PA 14-020 for alcohol service at Edwards Theater. When the council considers matters as complex as this one, the city's practice is to approve or deny the application by formal resolution. That resolution must contain findings of fact to support the council action. With that, I'm going to turn to staff and see if they can't start with the report.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to give a very brief presentation. Mr. John Curry, Senior Vice President of Food Service for Regal Entertainment, is in the audience and is prepared to make a presentation to the council.
Mr. Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, honorable council members, and obviously the residents of Aliso Viejo. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I realize this has been a long journey for all of us, but I believe it's very important for us to take a step back and review the facts surrounding our request. The movie industry is highly competitive. Not only do we compete with other theaters, we face challenges with high-definition home entertainment systems, upgraded pay-per-view and on-demand selections, and streaming services such as Netflix, all of which entice people to stay home more than they have in the past. We further compete with other entertainment options, including concerts, bowling centers, professional sports, and family entertainment centers. Simply put, we need to do everything we can to remain competitive with the proliferation of entertainment alternatives. And a kind of a sidebar, about a month ago, I actually took my daughters, I have twin girls, they're 14, I have a 10-year-old son. My wife and the kids, we went to a concert of a very popular singer, especially for the young adults, or the young ones like mine, the 14-year-olds. And I will have to say, going into a concert venue, I don't go very often, but I do kind of liken it to what we do here at the movie theater. We went to this concert with about 25 to 30,000 of our closest friends on a Saturday night. We walked in, we're all seated in a very dark auditorium. And as I walked through, if you look at every concession stand around every corner, there is a bar. There is alcohol service in the concession stands, and people are legally purchasing alcohol and taking it into the auditorium with their families, with other minors, etc., and there appeared to be no issues. I actually sat on an aisle seat so I could watch to see how security and other folks do interact with the crowd to monitor compliance. And I can tell you at that point, I did not see anybody walk up and down the aisle, but at least in our area, everything was going very well. So I do liken it as one of those other competitive venues that has the opportunity to sell alcohol, just as we're seeking to do here. It's very important to note that our Aliso Viejo has seen a decline in attendance over the past 5 years, roughly 20%, which is attributed to existing theaters in nearby cities adding amenities such as alcohol service. This, of course, is extremely alarming to us, but it should also be very concerning for City Council, as it dramatically affects the surrounding businesses and ultimately the city's revenues. Unfortunately, it appears that our loss has been someone else's gain, and also keep in mind that this will be further exacerbated with the new theater project in Laguna Hills. Now, as with most businesses, we need to attract and stay relevant with the adult crowd, as they are the decision makers and control all of the disposable income. Now, in our industry, approximately 74% of all moviegoers are 18 years of age or better, and 61% are 25 years of age or better. Now, when I looked at the demographics of within a 3-mile ring of our Aliso Viejo Theater, approximately 74% of the population is 20 years of age or better, and 68% are 25 years of age or better. So this really illustrates the importance of the adult crowd. Now, in an effort to do so, we submitted an application to establish a Type 41 on-sale beer and wine license at our Aliso Viejo Theater in 2014. And on November 10th of 2014, the Director of Planning Services approved the administrative use permit. Now, I had on here to go over all of the different conditions that were applied, but I do think at the end of the day, bottom line is that this was a highly conditioned use. It was highly conditioned after many discussions with the city. We also have ABC requirements. So I do believe it's heavily conditioned. And after subsequent conversations with city, with very productive calls and meetings, we agreed to even incorporate additional restrictions, which I believe has been submitted around as well. So again, bottom line, heavily conditioned, and also provides for a review period by city so that they can offer their thoughts after the end of a 6-month or a 1-year period. Now, it's also important to note that Regal has been approved for various alcoholic beverage licenses in more than 100 locations nationwide. In fact, we have 13 licenses in California, of which 4 are in neighboring Irvine. Irvine Spectrum started service in early March, and the balance followed in May. We have a proven track record of success in operating family-friendly environments with alcohol service. We realize having a license is a privilege, and we take our responsibilities very seriously. It's my understanding that the Aliso Viejo Police Services have conducted their investigation as well, and there has been absolutely no evidence of issues related to alcohol service in movie theaters. To further support this, I would like to have Lieutenant Bob Wren, formerly from the Orange County Sheriff's Department, join me at the podium so he can review his findings.
Good evening, Council. As a retired Orange County Sheriff's Department lieutenant and a former chief of police services, I looked at the issue of permitting the sale of alcohol at a movie theater from the perspective of a police chief. I focused my inquiry on 2 questions. Would the proposed change have a negative impact on public safety? And would the sale of alcohol at a movie theater impact the delivery of police services? Based on my law enforcement experience, I looked at 3 specific areas: calls for service, patrol officer experiences at each location, and personal observations. I obtained calls for service data for 2015 at 6 theaters in Orange County that serve alcohol. They were in Newport Beach, Tustin, 2 in Laguna Niguel, Brea, and Irvine. I spoke to law enforcement personnel at each of the respective agencies regarding calls for service at each of the selected movie theater locations. There were no alcohol-related calls at any of the theaters. I expected to see an increase in calls for service after the theaters began serving alcohol, but that was not the case. I then personally contacted law enforcement officers from each agency and asked if they had ever handled an alcohol-related call at the theater in their city. None of them had. Speaking to the boots on the ground is a way to find out what law enforcement activity is occurring that may not be reflected in calls for service, or in the calls for service data. For example, deputies and officers will concentrate their efforts at a problem location without being dispatched there in an attempt to deter criminal activity. As a result, there could be a simmering problem at a location, but not a corresponding increase in calls for service because the officers or deputies had suppressed criminal activity there. The deputies and officers I spoke to had not handled or heard of any problems at the theaters that serve alcohol. I also asked each if they had ever heard of anyone in their agency handling an alcohol-related call at the theater in their area. They had not. I then went to each theater myself. I ordered a beer or a glass of wine and watched a movie. I liked the way Regal Theaters sold beer and wine because it was very discreet. They use a small refrigerated case to sell beer and a sophisticated wine dispensing system for the wine. I was actually surprised to learn that beer and wine had been sold at a theater that I often frequent in Brea, and I didn't even know that they sold it there. Theater staff checked my ID at each location, and the Regal locations made me wear a wristband that limited my purchases to 2 for the evening. I observed increased theater checks by theater personnel. And because I'm a retired law enforcement officer, and with what's been going on throughout the country, I thought maybe there was some sort of threat. And they said, no, that increased activity in there was because of the sale of alcohol they do additional checks to make sure there aren't any problems inside. They told me that they're required to check the theater at least twice during every movie to make sure there are no problems. There were no issues of any kind inside the theaters that I was in. I would have no concerns whatsoever if a theater in my city chose to allow the sale of beer and wine, because there is no related negative impact on public safety and no related negative impact on the delivery of police services. And that concludes my report. I am available for questions if anyone has any.
Okay, hold on just one second. Mr. Curry, are you finished with your presentation? Okay, let's finish your rest of the presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions of staff or of my colleagues here.
Great. Thank you, Lieutenant Wren. Now I'd like to focus on guest sentiment. And I realize there is one group that is vehemently opposed to our efforts, and we have had ongoing communications with this group, including an offer to tour our Irvine Spectrum location so that they could see our procedures in action, but they did not respond. I also personally met with their representatives in early October. It was very apparent after my meeting that aside from walking away from our request or significantly altering our business model, we could not satisfy them. I certainly respect their position, but their views on this matter are not necessarily representative of the entire community of Aliso Viejo. We executed a poll with confirmed guests of our Aliso Viejo roughly a week and a half ago. Within 48 hours, we had nearly 800 respondents. We explained in the survey the need to remain competitive. We explained the procedures that we have presented to council and the city staff. And we asked them a few questions. One, how appealing would the alcohol service, the service of craft beer and wine, be to you? 51% found it appealing or highly appealing. 19% were neutral. And 30% found it unappealing. We then followed that question up with, how strongly do you agree or disagree with the following statement? The availability of this service would motivate you to visit the theater more frequently. 33% agreed, 27% were neutral, and 40% disagreed. Then we asked them, are you satisfied with the protocols and procedures outlined? 79% said yes, and 21% said no. Now, I would like to share some of the verbatims so that you can get a sense of perspective of our guests that go to Aliso Viejo. Probably a good option to compete with Sinopolis. A lot of people go there because of the alcohol and food and would probably be more inclined to go to Regal due to price of tickets. Good overall conservative approach. Continue looking for ways to provide the service without it disrupting the family experience. Great idea. What took so long? I never thought Disneyland would ever sell beer and wine either, but they do. It's sold at Chuck E. Cheese. It's about time you get on board. I'm not going to buy it because you will charge too much, but I agree that it's a good idea. This service has already been a proven success at competitors like Sinopolis. I appreciate the diversity that is being considered regarding food and beverage menu and totally support the business move. The idea is very appealing. As a parent, though, I was a little concerned, but as I continue to read the guidelines that will be implemented, it sounds wonderful. Sounds like you've thought of close to everything. I think your guidelines are good. It keeps overindulgence at bay. Being responsible should equal success. Wine coolers would be appreciated. I think this is a great idea. I'd rather go to the movies in Aliso and enjoy the options above than to go to Newport or Ocean Ranch. I really hope this occurs. Business would boom. Great idea to stay competitive. AMC does this already, and I like it. I have used it, and it makes going to the theater fun. I have been using the theaters with these amenities for the past 2 years. I sincerely would appreciate these features being added to yours. I am not a drinker of these kinds of beverages. However, the steps you are taking to make sure minors are not purchasing them seems reasonable. Not sure I'd use it personally, but from a business perspective, I think it's a great idea. I think this could add to the appeal of this location. This service would make going to the movies a bit more enjoyable. I have been to several other theaters that provide these beverages. Some buy them, others don't. People have behaved responsibly. Theater is entertainment and should be an alternative to just dining out. Therefore, with the optional amenities, that would be great, but price and quality have to be reasonable as well. I enjoy the alcoholic beverages already served at the Irvine location, and since I live in Aliso, I would love it if this would come to my home theater. It would make me go to Regal more often as I split my movie visits to Regency, and you can always get wine and appetizers. From what I've seen at other theaters, this is not really abused by moviegoers. I am a parent and realize that other parents are concerned about youth having access. I don't believe that that's a concern. I don't see anything wrong with this plan at all. Awesome service. Would love for it to be in Aliso Viejo. I think that offering alcohol at a theater would be beneficial and will show that you are responding to trends and are trying to stay competitive. I think this is a very progressive move to keep competitive with other movie options. This would be great to get the business back from luxury theaters that have been popping up. Nice to have a beer or glass of wine while watching a movie. I often opt to stay at home to watch a movie instead of heading to the theater so we can enjoy beer or wine while watching. This will motivate me to get out more often. And lastly, I've experienced drinking craft beer at other theaters and found it quite enjoyable. Everyone who did get alcoholic beverages were responsible, and it made the viewing experience more pleasant. I highly recommend this service as it would draw more customers. So as you can see, this is an amenity that the majority of our guests want. Adding craft beer and wine service would allow us to meet their expectations and would allow us to be competitive with surrounding entertainment venues. Simply put, it's vital for our business. I completely understand that some don't want the theater to change, but in reality, we need to in order to remain a viable business. We have a significant investment in Aliso Viejo. We have great team members that live and work in the community that we need to think about, and we ultimately have a responsibility to ensure that the theater is successful as possible. It's not our intention to change the overall nature of Aliso Viejo. We simply aim to enhance the movie-going experience for our adult moviegoers and to remain a family-friendly environment. To that end, we would be at a serious competitive disadvantage if we cannot offer the same food and beverage options, such as craft beer and wine, that are already available at numerous theaters surrounding us. I absolutely agree with the Planning Department's conclusion on the original staff report that an upgraded Edwards Theater will contribute to the overall appeal of the Aliso Viejo Town Center as an entertainment destination. In turn, Edwards Theater's success in drawing patrons can have a positive influence in attracting and retaining related businesses throughout the town center. And I believe this was even further echoed in an article published in the Orange County Register in March of 2015 titled, "Where is the Nightlife?" The article contemplates a revitalization of town center and essentially acknowledges the fact that businesses must be included in order for the overall community to be successful. So in closing, given that there is no credible information or evidence that should prohibit our request, coupled with our strong track record and the fact that we have the support of the police department and city staff, we respectfully request that you affirm the previous administrative approval. And please, just do not put us at a competitive disadvantage and hurt neighboring businesses. If we're successful and we're able to bring people back and recapture some of that attendance, it helps all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. Mayor Pro Tem Munzing?
Yes, and these will be strictly for the presenter. I'm looking forward to a long evening of trying to work through the very detailed sides of this in an effort to not allow history to be rewritten. And I would love concurrence from my fellow council member, Mr. Harrington, only because it was his specific question regarding the financial aspects that were asked from your attorney, Mr. Evans. Certainly the way I felt the response was, it was very unsatisfactory, I must say. It was very unsatisfactory, as you know. I felt it was purely a lack of authorization to comment on the financial aspects of it. That was it felt like a softball question. It was because for me, it seems obvious that a very high return item that's being added to your offerings is of course going to be more profitable than not having a high return item added to your offering. And it's a given, but we couldn't get that answer. And that was, I think, the point of frustration, is that we couldn't get a straight, just a yes or no answer. I felt as though he may not have been authorized to give that. So it wasn't due to, I certainly don't recall anybody saying, no, it's not going to be profitable. It's just, we're not allowed to, basically, we can't say that at this point. That's what's nice about having you here, because you are allowed to say that at this point.
In retrospect, we would have handled this differently.
Sure.
There's no question.
Of course. And that's certainly the feeling that I got, is that somebody wasn't cleared to make a statement because they didn't want to overpromise on a certain issue. And that is definitely the feeling I got.
Fair.
I think the big part of this is understanding what is really at play here. What are we really looking at? And I know that thus far you didn't cover specifically initially what the items are that we're looking at. So just for the public's stance here, we're looking at very specific concessions that will be allowed to sell beer and wine. Is that correct? We're going to designate only very, very certain concessions to do that. Originally, the original plan was every stand was going to be able to do that.
That's correct.
One thing I do want to have you make clear: will the cashiers all be 21?
If the Type 41, I believe that the original requires them to be at least 18, with
Right.
the addition of the food and beverage, or the food items to be
Are
more of a
you
restaurant.
are you going to be running this operation as you're running the Irvine Spectrum operation? Can that be a stipulation? Only because when I met with the manager at Irvine Spectrum, only 21-year-olds had any access to any of the alcohol. Is that a possibility, or is that's at least what I was being told over there?
That's would be a
Because
possibility. Sure.
when I inspected it, the very benign, very low advertised cooler in the back behind the cashier, lock and key. It had a big deadbolt on it. Only 21-year-olds who had been trained to be a cashier and handle the alcohol had a key. As well as the wine was much like OC Wine Mart here. You had a specific card you put in, you put the glass in, put the card in.
That's correct.
Only authorized 21-year-old cashiers had a card access and could do that. So that was very impressive for me. Once again, the fluorescent colored wristbands with a mark on it, so you can only have at the most absolutely 2 glasses of wine or beer per patron at that point. Is it?
Those are the same.
And then I'm just going from, once again,
Those are the
folks,
same
I met for an
procedures.
hour with the manager going over every fine detail.
That's right.
Every time a patron comes back out, if they wanted a second glass of wine or beer, they would have to get carded again,
Yes,
which
sir.
is great.
That's correct.
No individual was allowed to go buy one for he and his wife, because that's inappropriate. Every single person gets carded.
Must have an ID. That's right.
There was a statistic that ran off here, because I've been trying to find out what we're talking about volume-wise. Let's just say hypothetically, in 1,000 patrons, 1,000 ticket purchases, approximately how many glasses of beer or wine currently would you estimate out of 1,000?
45 to 50.
45 to 50, and that we have no way of knowing whether that's 1 or 2 glasses per patron. Is that right?
That's correct.
So at a
Not
maximum,
from a technical standpoint.
so
you know, from
we're
the
looking at
systems.
4.5% to 5% of all ticket sales and in a purchase of some sort of an alcoholic beverage
Correct.
at this point in those offerings.
Yes, sir.
Okay. In the, obviously, Lieutenant Wren inspected Orange County. It's all right. no need to come up yet. Inspected Orange County facilities. How many theaters nationwide are you currently offering beer and wine sales?
103.
103. Of those 103, how many, I don't want to say major, just any infractions, any problems, have you had any ABC licenses revoked in any of your theaters thus far?
No.
Have you had any major, suspensions thus far?
No.
Have you had any major, that you heard about, oh, we had a big problem in Nebraska or something, wherever you have it, I don't know.
Not in Nebraska, no.
Not in Nebraska, anywhere.
No, I mean, we have a great track record across the country.
Okay, so it's only 4.5% to 5% of the total ticket sales end up in a glass of beer or wine.
That's what it's been so far in the California market.
Okay, that's in the California market. All right. One thought I had when I think my wife and I, either I hit a movie or my wife and I went, was the proximity of the seats. And in our theater, they're not as big as over in Irvine Spectrum at this point, at least from what I can tell. Then again, just for the record, when I went to Irvine Spectrum, I was not comped a ticket. I just went in and talked to the manager. I didn't see a movie. So just making sure that wasn't, no impropriety there. But when I sat down, I did notice, yes, that the seats are fairly close together, and a more of a heavy encouragement that if you have let's say this is a glass of beer or a cup of wine, if you do put it, if perchance the chance that you might sit next to a underage person that you may or may not know, is it possible to put signage and encouragement that you use the other armrest, to use not the one. I mean, it comes down, once again, it comes down to good faith of our residents, who I believe in, is that you encourage them to say, hey, if you have a kid next to you, would that be something that you would be open to? Either encouragement, putting up a sign, it's like, look, if you're sitting next to a minor, please do not put any alcoholic beverage in the armrest next to that child. So there's nobody sneaking a drink on you.
Sure.
Okay, so that would be another concession that might be worthwhile.
Sure.
All right. For the time being, that's I will most certainly have more questions down the road, but for right now, that'll do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we left that we were going to have the applicant come back and respond and do whatever rebuttals or whatever you would need to do.
What I wanted to say, one, I appreciate the process. I've heard a lot of heart-wrenching stories this evening. I've had the opportunity to mingle with the crowd. I've heard a lot of heartwarming stories as well. And I can tell you what I am most impressed with was many of the youth that had courage to come up to this podium and speak what was on their heart and on their minds. I appreciate that very much. That is a credit to the community. I really appreciate, what they were able to do. Now, from a Regal perspective, I believe that we will agree to disagree on some of the things that were discussed tonight, and I think that's okay. This is a healthy discussion amongst the community and Regal and local government. I believe at the end of the day, we have presented the facts of the matter to council and had those discussions with the city. I believe that we have proven that we have a great track record to execute alcohol service in a family-friendly environment. It is not our intention at all to change that environment of the theater. We operate family-friendly theaters with alcohol service across the country and in neighboring cities today. And we do that very responsibly and respectfully. And I would appreciate that the council would vote based on the facts and affirm the administrative approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Munzing, on the applicant.
Yeah. We've got a lot on the table here. Got a lot to talk about. First of all, I appreciate Councilmember Chun revisiting the issue with our city attorney as far as negotiating the conditional use permit and how that might be drawn up. And that was my intent, is that these are all things that can be, on the table, and how we control that, and how when infractions happen. I'm much more of a freedom guy, but when people talk about rule of law, you implement the rule of law, and you don't not implement it, because that sends a really, really bad message. A couple of things have been said that I want to clarify. when I'm in a movie now, I rarely see, if an attendant comes in at all in our theater here where we do not have alcohol, I see maybe them come in and kind of glance around and leave. Certainly, once alcohol is introduced, once beer and wine is introduced, I'm being told it's like, is that a fair assumption? Right now, I think you said twice during the movie, but it's not an in-depth review and not an in-depth inspection at this point. It's making sure everything's good, kind of checking it out.
Yeah, they're going to walk in. They're going to monitor, guest activity.
Right.
Make sure there are no disturbances. They're going to monitor temperature control. They're going to look at the quality of picture that's on,
right,
et cetera. But many times, as a consumer, when we're in watching a movie, we're engrossed in the movie. We're not necessarily going to look over to see if someone has, walked over. I mean, it is our responsibility. We want to make sure that we deliver the best-in-class movie-going experience.
Right.
So we take great pride
in that. At this point, that would probably imply, hey, guys, don't be totally noticeable. Be a little bit subtle, inspect, but you don't want to disrupt the movie-going experience of the person there. Now, with the addition of the alcohol, let's just take Irvine Spectrum specifically. Now they're inspecting every half an hour. Are we getting assurances that level of inspection will increase? I mean, we're not walk in looky-loo. I'm expecting up the aisles, checking every aisle. I know somebody mentioned that all you can see is light on the face, light on the shoulders, and an awareness of that. And my thinking, and now this is coffee, of course, my thinking, see a little junior with a clear cup, which is noticeably different than a solid cup. Then that's where you're trying to watch and actually visibly watch and make sure that the cups are with, once again, they are noticeably, it's a clear cup versus the standard Coke cup. But, and we may want to go into that. Tell the folks real quick what the difference is in the cup. I know that was brought up as well.
So, I mean, our cup sizes today, we have paper vessels for our soft drinks, which are a 32 and a 44-ounce drink.
So big.
Very large.
Big cups.
And then we have a plastic 54-ounce. So it's a much larger drink. Then for the alcohol, right now we have a 16-ounce clear vessel with a distinct Regal logo on there.
That's 12 ounces,
to keep
but it's a little bit bigger than
very discernible. The CABC also restricts the sizes in which we can offer in the theater, which is no more than a 16-ounce beer. And I believe, is it 8 ounce for the...
Wine would be a standard.
But our standard serving for wine is 5 to 6 ounces right now. So we do fall, below that, and we have those distinct, which are smaller vessels. So yes, they would be very distinguishable within the auditorium.
Okay, great. I know we did cover the, once again, the 4.5% to 5% of the actual tickets purchased are those buying the beer and wine. They're not saying 4.5% to 5% of the sales, because it's a profitability issue, which as a council, that's, hey, if you're not profitable, you don't stay, and that's a problem for the city. We lose on many fronts. Those pretty much cover what I'm looking at for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions of the applicant?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Go for it.
Yeah, I apologize. I got my notes all over the place, as you can assume. One comment I did want to make is that I feel a little bad for you in that some of the folks in the audience are commenting that you are the innovator when it comes to bringing in alcohol. And then obviously other comments have been made up here from the dais that, you're not an innovator, you're following the trend. So you can't win for losing in this case. But at this point, I do see that it is absolutely true. I think Sinopolis was the first one I ever heard of that was really coming in, offering that higher level of service in the competition for that entertainment dollar. And that's I think what we're getting to here, both at our restaurants and our theaters, the competition for that very limited entertainment dollar, both for the family with kids and without and with adults. Other comments were made. I'm not going to get into the financial comments because those are a little bit rough. But one comment was made when I had asked whether out of the 103 theaters, whether there had been reports of problems with kids drinking and other reports. And and your word was impugned in a way saying he didn't know, he didn't answer the question correctly, that's not your responsibility. Is it fair or safe for me to assume that you did give me a truthful answer and that was a researched answer that either by your risk department or somebody else within Regal?
Our managers are required to submit incident reports, if any occur, up through their district managers. They run their way up through our operations department, and then we as a senior group evaluate and address. But yes, our risk department is involved when applicable, but those things do boil up.
So you absolutely, I just want to be clear for the audience that we're not missing something here. You absolutely would know about this.
Yes.
Okay.
Should know. Yes.
Good. Yeah. I mean, okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. I will then proceed to let you ask the question.
Okay, I just didn't know it was my turn yet. I was like, hey, that was my big crescendo. I apologize. I do have some comments to make. A number of months ago at the original meeting, and I do have an apology to make to a lot of you in the audience. There were feelings that of whatever I said, I may not have said it in the most eloquent terms, and I do want to apologize to you for that. I've made I think some good friendships through this process, even though we don't always agree. And those of you who we've talked and met for coffee and discussed this months and months ago, if I offended anyone, I definitely do apologize for that. That was not my intent. Many of you who know me know that, my kids don't live here with me, but I do take kids very, very seriously. I have 2 grown adult daughters, and we took them to many movies growing up. I am a huge advocate for freedom. I fight on many different levels. Always watching and the reason I got into politics in the first place is because I thought government was getting too big and government was getting into parts of our lives that it shouldn't do. We can't buy a 100-watt light bulb anymore that's an incandescent bulb. There's lots of things that we cannot do any longer because government at all levels have stuck their fingers into our lives. Some of you have called me more libertarian-minded, and that's okay. I fight every issue to see what are we imposing a burden on 50,000 residents. We have 50,000 residents in this city, both children, certainly a lot of children, but I love and respect the folks of this city very, very much. And with that, as I said, I respect them. I treat each other like adults, as many of you do. And with this issue, 21 years old is the limit where you cannot drink before. I've looked up statistics. I mean, let me address, first of all, the ABC issues. We are not a state agency. ABC is a state agency that governs the theater. It governs restaurants. It governs what happens. The folks with the Regal have to apply with the ABC. There are inspections. Those are ABC rules. They're not our rules. There's lots of folks in here saying, well, they're not doing the kitchen appropriately. I have asked over and over, does ABC come out and inspect? Yes, they do. They're the ones who came out and said, you have to do certain things with a kitchen and provide certain things. That's an ABC rule. And as a city council here in Aliso Viejo, I'm not an expert on all things alcohol. And that's their job. And they make the rules. And for us to say, well, they're not enforcing their rules to an appropriate level, I do think that's overstepping our bounds as a city council in Aliso Viejo. When it comes to the census tracts, I've asked many people in the city, hey, what census tract do you live in? I don't know. You don't know. I would venture to guess, unless you have this chart. I mean, I'm part of the fighting 626.39, and we don't have, I guess we have 8 approved and one license there. We all associate ourselves with living in Aliso Viejo. When you talk about a family-friendly environment, family-friendly city, we're talking about Aliso Viejo. We're not talking about .37 census tract at our town center. I was not part, and I don't know if the mayor was part of that group since he's a founding one, but I don't think any of us were part of that founding designer I believe it was the Mission Viejo company who designed this city. They designed it a specific way. They did not design us like Laguna Niguel. They did not design us like Mission Viejo, which is a much more sprawled out. You've got lots of restaurants in different corners. They designed the city to have a center hub where the shopping, the restaurants, the theaters, everything's in one entertainment spot, which I think we all love. I mean, I really do love that, because what it does is it brings us together, and that is what we're talking about right now with this family-friendly environment in the city. It's because of the design of the city and the central location where we can come together and we can have a coffee at Bagels and Brew, and I hang out with my buddies at the skateboard shop there and my friends over at the different locations, and we've made friends and bonds, and it's our community that makes this family-friendly. Someone said, we don't want it to change, and I understand that. But then I asked, how many restaurants have gone out of business or turned over even in the last 2 years? Is it 8? Is it 10? It's quite a few. We've had a lot of stores turn over. We had Fat Burger. Now we have Pita Pita. We've got lots of different restaurants. But it's this community, and it's the people in this community that make it such a beautiful place and make it so desirable. And I've said before, I respect the people in this community, and I appreciate the people in this community. And the people of this community keep each other safe. We watch over each other's kids when we're at the fountain. I was a protective dad when my kids were little, and if I see a kid, going to fall or get in trouble, I'm the first one to run over and try to make sure that kid doesn't get hurt. And we watch over each other as a community and as neighbors and as friends. And if we see disruption going on in the theaters, and that's one thing, the arguments have, it's a two-edged sword. I heard the theater had 25 kids in the theater causing trouble, yelling at adults. Now, it was twisted towards, gee, what if that adult had been drinking a glass of wine? I turn it the other way. What are we doing to help control our kids when we've got 25 kids in a theater disrupting and causing trouble? And I wrote over and over in the emails that it mentioned in the emails. I did some searches. There were 25 mentions of drunk in these emails. I respect my fellow residents, and I say I always default to freedom. Safety, absolutely, but I watch over other kids, and I love the kids in this community. Heck, I broke my leg 2 weeks ago trying to skateboard with the kids in this community, and because it's a good way to interact with our wonderful kids in the community. And we watch over each other. We watch over each other's kids. We love this community, and that's the biggest thing. But the default, our kids won't have much if they don't have freedom. I know a lot of people have mentioned, one of the young men mentioned the Bill of Rights, and I agree, that leads to freedom. That's where I'm at on this, is that I respect all of you. I appreciate all of you. Sadly, I study the issues heavily. I study the numbers. One of the statistics that I do want to bring up, and I asked for this to be researched, because of the fact that, if there is, which I'm not saying there isn't, and I was often, a couple of these emails said, an epidemic of underage drinking in our community. I asked the police department, I asked the ABC, I said, how many of our ABC licenses of the 25, and that is in addition to the stores and mini marts and everything else, how many have been suspended? How many ABC licenses have been suspended in this community? Now, if there was an epidemic of underage drinking, somebody's getting the alcohol to the kids. There have been no suspensions, no reports, no revocations. Nobody's lost a license in this city. I asked the sheriff's department to look up under the citation numbers, how many citations have there been for furnishing alcohol to minors by businesses in our community? There have been none. So it's not the businesses in our community that are providing the alcohol that I do agree is a problem. I've read some of the other emails saying that, kids are now bringing in Skittles and candy and other things, but once we allow alcohol, the kids are going to obviously be bringing in the booze. Well, we know from comments the kids are already bringing in the alcohol, and when I was at Irvine Spectrum, I was asking about that. I said, what have the inspections brought forth? I said, we haven't caught any kids, but we may have saved a life. One gentleman was in there and he was drinking his 6th bottle of NyQuil, and the inspection caught that. He had a paper bag, he was drinking it. They came in, they got medical attention to the guy, and that was something that would not have been picked up if they hadn't been doing inspections. So we take this seriously. We do a lot of research. I respect all of you, and I've read every single email and looked at, Sean Hansen did a tremendous report on this, and I respect that. When I look at the ABC numbers, I believe we're only at 45% of our allowed licenses in the city. I know 5 versus 18 looks like a lot. I don't know if any of you go to Santa Barbara on vacation at all. State Street, which is a wonderful destination location for vacation, one census tract in Santa Barbara along State Street is approved for 6 on-site alcohol licenses. They have 137. It's out of control, but it's 137 in one census tract just because the city's designed that to be the entertainment hub of the entire area. We have 5 and it's 18, but overall we have 45% in the whole city, and we all identify as Aliso Viejo. We don't identify as our individual census tracts. Nobody knows what census tract they live in. It's the design of the city. So those are just some of the things I have to say, and I appreciate your time.
With that, I will ask if there is a motion.
I'd like to make a motion.
I'm going to respectfully disagree with
Okay.
the mayor. With all due respect, I'm going to move item B, 2B, to approve the use. I do not think, with all due respect to the people who spoke today, and I mean that with all my heart, I really do. I don't agree with you. That it's just as simple as that. I don't see it as the end of the world. So I have to do what the best I can do to help the business survive and succeed. This is not, to me, that serious an issue. They say they need it. I asked 2 questions when they came here originally. I said, "Do you need this for your business?" And they were very inadequate. Now, their executive came and actually spoke. It defies common sense when the market is changing for you to come in and say, well, the market's changing, but it's not going to affect us any. It was ridiculous, but it's not my job to make your case. You need to come in and make your case. And in my opinion, they've done that today. They've made their case. They have put in additional restrictions. To me, that was a compromise. And the reason they put those additional restrictions in was because of the community coming out and speaking out. Otherwise, they don't put those restrictions in. So to me, they have compromised. They've come part way. They didn't come all the way. And I think it's incumbent upon us not to regulate them out of business. I thought Mr. Davis's presentation on the business aspect of it and their SEC filings was fascinating. But to me, that actually, I think, makes the case to see if they can't survive with this additional revenue source. So I think it's incumbent upon us to help this business survive. The mayor at the meeting the first time mentioned this is a very important piece of town center. It's not just a theater. It's the anchor at the theater. And we need to remember that. It's not just what we get from them in tax revenue. It's not just about that. It's about all the survival of all the other businesses and what kind of attitude are we showing to other businesses who want to come here if we don't approve this. So I'm going to move 2B.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on 2B. And any further discussion? If not, I will call for the vote. And let's do it roll call so there's no confusion, because I'm sure we'll try to be confused. So I will ask for a roll call. City Clerk?
Councilmember Chen?
Nay.
Councilmember Harrington?
Aye.
Councilmember Sonoda?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Munzing?
Aye.
Mayor Phillips?
No. Okay, so with that, Mr. City Attorney, I can probably do the quick math here, but I'm sure you're going to tell me that we probably need to do another motion to